My name is Claire Whitfield and I am 34 years old. The morning my mother-in-law screamed at me to get out of her house was the same morning I had a termination letter folded neatly in my purse, waiting to be delivered. I had planned this moment for 3 months, ever since I discovered the truth about what Diane Whitfield had been doing behind my back inside the family company. She thought I was still the quiet daughter-in-law who nodded along at dinner and never asked questions about the business. She had no idea I had spent those 3 months building a case so solid that by the end of that day, she would no longer have a job to walk into. I married into the Whitfield family 8 years ago, and from the very first dinner, Diane made it clear that I was not good enough for her son, Marcus. She never said it outright. She was too careful for that. Instead, she said it in small ways, in comments about my background, in the way she introduced me to her friends as Marcus's wife instead of using my name, in the way she rearranged my seating at family gatherings. So I was always at the far end of the table, away from the conversations that mattered. I told myself it did not matter. I told myself that as long as Marcus loved me, none of it mattered. I was wrong about a lot of things back then. Marcus's family owned a mid-sized logistics company that his father had built from nothing, and after his father passed away, Diane had taken over as head of operations, a position she was never actually qualified for. She had no background in logistics, no formal training in running a company of that size. She got the position because she was the widow, and the board, out of respect for her late husband, let her keep it. What none of them knew, what I had only recently discovered, was that Diane had been quietly moving money out of the company for over 2 years, funneling it into accounts that had nothing to do with the business. I found out by accident. I work in corporate accounting, a career Diane always dismissed as something to keep me busy until I found a real purpose in life, meaning until I had children and stopped working entirely. She never understood that my job gave me access to financial systems most people in that family never bothered to look at. One evening, while helping Marcus organize some old company files for a shareholder meeting, I noticed a pattern of transfers that did not match any legitimate vendor or expense. The amounts were small enough to avoid immediate attention, but consistent enough that over 2 years, they added up to a staggering number. I did not say anything right away. I knew that if I brought this to Marcus first, he would try to protect his mother, the way he always did, the way his entire family always protected each other while treating me like an outsider who happened to share their last name. So instead, I went to the one person on the board I trusted completely, a woman named Sandra Kim, who had worked with Marcus's father for over 15 years and who had never fully trusted Diane's leadership either. I brought her everything I had found: bank statements, transfer records, invoices for services that were never actually rendered. Sandra's face went pale as she went through the documents with me at her kitchen table. "This is not a mistake," she said quietly, sliding the papers back toward me. "This is theft, and it has been going on for a long time." We spent the next several weeks building a complete financial trail, quietly, carefully, making sure every piece of evidence could stand on its own if Diane tried to claim it was a misunderstanding. Sandra brought in a forensic accountant she trusted from outside the company, someone with no connection to the Whitfield family, to independently verify everything we had found. The final report was even worse than I expected. Diane had diverted enough money to nearly cripple the company's cash reserves, all while presenting false numbers to the rest of the board every quarter. The board called an emergency session. I was not technically a member, but because I was the one who uncovered the fraud and because Sandra insisted I be present to explain the financial trail, I sat in that boardroom and watched 6 people who had known Diane for over a decade come to terms with what she had done. There was no dramatic outburst, no denial in the room, just silence, and then a unanimous vote. Diane Whitfield was to be removed from her position, effective immediately, and the matter would be handed over to legal counsel to determine what came next. I was the one who volunteered to deliver the termination letter in person, not because I wanted to see her suffer, but because after 8 years of being made to feel small in that family, I needed her to hear the truth from my mouth, not read it in a lawyer's cold, formal language. I drove to her house that same afternoon, the letter sitting in my purse like a weight I had been carrying for months, finally about to be set down. I had not told Marcus yet. I had not told anyone outside the boardroom. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw Diane's curtains shift, the same way they always did when she wanted to know who was arriving before she opened the door. She had no idea that in the next few minutes, everything she believed about her place in this family and in that company was about to collapse in front of her. She opened the door before I even reached the porch, her arms already crossed, her expression already hardening into the same contempt she had worn toward me for 8 straight years. "What do you want?" she asked, not even bothering with a greeting. I did not answer right away. I simply reached into my purse and pulled out the envelope, holding it up just enough for her to see her own name printed across the front in bold, official lettering. Her eyes moved from the envelope to my face, and I watched something flicker behind her expression, something that almost looked like fear, though she tried immediately to bury it. "What is that?" she demanded, her voice sharper now, though there was a slight tremble underneath it that had not been there a second earlier. I stepped closer, close enough that she could no longer pretend not to see the company letterhead at the top of the page. "You should sit down before you open this," I told her, my voice calm, steady, nothing like the timid tone she was used to hearing from me. Her face twisted, and before I could say another word, she screamed at me to get off her porch, to get out of her life, the same way she had screamed at me 100 times before over the years. But this time, I did not move. This time, I simply held the envelope out toward her and said the 6 words that would end everything she thought she still controlled. What she said back to me, and what she did in the seconds after she finally opened that letter, was something none of us in that family would ever forget. Diane's hand shook as she reached out and snatched the envelope from my fingers, tearing it open right there on the porch instead of waiting the way I had suggested. Her eyes moved across the page fast, then slower, then fast again, as if she was rereading the same line over and over, hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something else. "This is a mistake," she said, her voice cracking in a way I had never heard from her before. "This has to be some kind of mistake. I built this company back up after my husband died. I kept it running." "You did not keep it running," I said quietly. "You kept it bleeding, and you covered it up with false numbers every single quarter so no one would notice until it was almost too late." I watched her face drain of color as I spoke, watched 8 years of superiority collapse in real time on the same porch where she had once told me I would never truly belong to this family. "The board has the full report, Diane. Bank statements, transfer records, a forensic accountant's findings. This is not an accusation. This is documentation, and it is already in the hands of legal counsel." She took a step back, gripping the door frame the way someone grips something solid when the ground beneath them no longer feels safe. "You did this," she said, her voice shifting from panic into something colder, something accusing. "You have hated me since the day Marcus brought you home. This is you getting revenge because I never approved of you." I almost laughed at that, not because it was funny, but because it was exactly the kind of thing she would say, the same deflection she had used my entire marriage whenever anyone questioned her judgment. I shook my head slowly. "I did not do this to you, Diane. You did this to yourself. I only found it, and once I found it, I had a responsibility to the people whose paychecks depend on this company staying honest. That includes employees who have worked there for 20 years. That includes Marcus. That includes people who trusted you." She looked down at the letter again, and I could see her scanning for a loophole, some phrase she could twist into an argument, but there was nothing there for her to grab onto. The board had made sure of that. "Marcus will fix this," she said finally, lifting her chin, trying to reclaim some scrap of authority. He will talk to the board. He will not let them do this to his own mother. I felt something steady settle in my chest, because I already knew something she did not know yet. Marcus is not going to fight this, I told her. He sat in that boardroom this morning. He saw the same documents I did. He voted with the rest of the board, Diane. Unanimously. For a moment, she simply stared at me, and I watched the last piece of her certainty shatter completely. Her own son, the person she had spent decades shaping into someone who would always defend her no matter what, had looked at the evidence and chosen the company's survival over her position. She had never imagined a version of the world where Marcus did not automatically take her side. He would not do that, she whispered, though there was no conviction left in her voice at all. He is my son. He is also the majority shareholder's husband, I said, and he understands what happens to 400 employees if this company collapses because someone at the top was stealing from it for 2 years. I let that sentence sit in the air between us, the same way she had once let cruel silences sit between us at family dinners, forcing me to feel every second of my own humiliation. Now it was her turn to feel it. You have until the end of the week to return what you took, I continued. Legal counsel will be in touch about the terms. Whether this stays a private financial matter or becomes a criminal one depends entirely on how quickly and how fully you cooperate. Her hands were trembling now, the termination letter crumpling slightly in her grip. Get off my porch, she said, but the words came out weak this time, nothing like the sharp command she had thrown at me only minutes earlier. There was no fury left behind them, only the hollow sound of someone who had just realized how much power they had actually lost. I turned and walked back to my car without looking back, the same way she had once watched me leave family dinners in tears without ever once calling after me to apologize. 3 days later, Diane returned a significant portion of the missing funds through her attorney, along with a formal resignation letter that made no mention of wrongdoing, only personal reasons and a desire to spend more time with family. The board accepted it quietly, choosing to avoid a public scandal that could have damaged the company's reputation and the livelihoods of everyone who depended on it. Marcus did not speak to his mother for almost a month afterward. When he finally did, our marriage had already changed in ways neither of us could undo, because he had finally seen, in black and white financial records, the difference between loyalty and blindness. Sandra Kim was appointed as the new head of operations, with real oversight this time, real audits, real accountability built into every decision. I was offered a formal position on the Financial Oversight Committee, a role I accepted without hesitation, because for the first time in 8 years, I was not sitting quietly at the end of the table. I was sitting where decisions were actually made. Diane still lives in that same house, the one with the porch where she screamed at me to get out more times than I can count. But she no longer has a company to hide behind, no title to shield her from the truth, and no family loyalty left to protect her from the consequences of her own choices. If this story hit you the way it hit me while I lived through it, do me one favor before you go. Hit that subscribe button right now, because there are so many more stories like this one coming. Stories about women who stopped shrinking themselves, uncovered the truth hiding in plain sight, and finally took back the power that was theirs all along.